back to Takedown MMA. Evan Herzog of the Fight Magazine, Albert Rosales of Grinders Fitness. We're here on ibtv.us and Roku. We're going to jump right back into where we left off in segment 1, picking up in this welterweight division. We talked about Darren Till and Wonderboy Thompson and the announcement of that fight in our first segment. If you didn't catch that segment, go back and listen to that segment. So this segment makes sense. We had started to kind of talk about Colby Covington. You would have liked to seen him and Darren Till fight, or even him and Wonderboy fight. I like both those fights, but the one that the UFC seems most interested in, and the big rumor, it's almost a done deal, is going to be RDA versus Colby Covington for, wait for it, another interim championship. This one's going to take place in Brazil. That makes this very interesting. Colby Covington has showed more disrespect to an entire country of people than I think anybody had, maybe other than, he has, Conor McGregor said a lot of crazy stuff too in the build-up to Jose Aldo about, riding into the slums in Brazil, right, and taking all their women and all this stuff. But Colby he's not as exciting of a fighter as Conor McGregor, so he doesn't, he doesn't get away with that, and I don't think he should. He said some really stupid stuff, but now he's going to have to answer the bell, going back down to Brazil and fighting RDA. Besides all the trash talk and all that stuff, what do you think of the matchup, first and foremost?
Well, first, I think the UFC needs to hire a security team just to follow Colby Covington everywhere it goes, because that's ridiculous. And the difference between him and McGregor is McGregor didn't really trash the country. Right. He kind of dogged on the Brazilian fighters, but he actually had fans there, in Brazil. Whereas Colby Covington has just come out completely trashed the entire country. Style-wise, this is going to be a great fight. I think RDA is he's a matchup nightmare for the entire division right now. He's on fire right now. He is on fire. And to be able to come from 155, go up to 170, and do this, this is the former 155 champ. So to move up to 170 and be able to do the same things that you did at 155 is incredible. That's a huge weight jump. And I think this could be a barn burner of a fight, honestly. Colby Covington's obviously got, he's kind of got that in-your-face mentality. He's very physical. He's very intimidating. And I think the way RDA fights, there's just no way that this is a boring fight. There's no way on earth this is going to be a boring fight. They're going to go out there and somebody's going to get carried out. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that it's in Brazil, just the atmosphere is just going to be nasty. I don't know if it's going to be a main event or a co-main or whatever.
I'm sure. I think they're going to make it a main.
Man, that's going to have so much heat on it. I can already hear the Brazilian crowd. I can already hear them now. That's going to be a tough
I can see them now. Yeah, honestly, he might bring an umbrella for the walkout, because we saw what his exit out of the cage brought to him, at the last time he went to Brazil to take down one of their idols. And people can't forget, behind all of the, the trash talk and the cringe-worthy cheesiness that is Colby Covington, behind all of that, the dude does what he says he's going to do most of the time.
Right.
You can think what you want about him, but this guy is a born-bred fighter. You can go on and watch 15, 20 minutes of him and Jorge Masvidal wrestling in about a 200-square-foot apartment.
In an apartment, yeah.
Dude, and slamming.
And surprisingly, they didn't break any furniture.
That's
they didn't put any holes in the wall. I don't know how they even pull that off. I actually watched that video.
Yeah, it's great. If you hang out with dudes like Jorge Masvidal, though, my point kind of being is, don't forget who Colby Covington is.
Right.
The dude is a fighter, and he is a bad, bad man he's a fighter with a street fight mentality with top-notch wrestling. He's a scary dude, and I think I love the matchup. I think they're very similar fighters, to be honest.
I do. I think, obviously, Colby's he doesn't have as many miles on him as RDA does. He's, in terms of fight miles, he hasn't been in the wars that RDA's been in. That can work one of two ways. RDA's got more experience in big-time fights, or it can come back the other way and Colby's the fresher fighter.
Right.
So who knows how that's going to play out. it's going to be interesting to see how RDA deals with the wrestling aspect. I think that could be the key to Colby winning this fight, is if he can just put RDA on his back and get dominant positions throughout the fight. But man, we've seen RDA come out and just surprise everybody, beating people he's not supposed to be beating. You know, like, just go back to his career, even back to 155, and you look at who he's fought and how many times you've been like, well, he's going to lose that one. Well, he's going to lose that one. Well, he's not going to win a title. And he just comes out.
He's always there.
Smashes. So now moving up to 170. And Colby's not a small 170 either. And obviously, Rafael moving up a weight class, he's not going to be the biggest guy in the world. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
I agree. I think there's going to be a little bit of added pressure for RDA being the Brazilian. I think we've seen, you know, it used to be a feeding ground for Brazilians. When they had a show in Brazil, they would give a Brazilian hero, kind of a, not to disrespect, but not as big of names. Right. They bring in Japanese fighters from, you know, fresh off of a organization in Japan,
right,
and kind of, you know, feed them to the piranhas and let Brazil have their night. That was when Brazilians kind of were holding the UFC ship above water, you know, not letting it sink. That's kind of changed over the last few years, where they've really put the pressure on the Brazilian fighter to take big fights in Brazil. And we've seen a lot of fighters fall under that pressure over the last couple of years. You know, we had Verdum get knocked out in his hometown by Stipe. You had Colby go down there and quite frankly beat up Damian Maia after a long dominant run by Maia, you know.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for the pressure. And RDA hasn't fought in Brazil for a long time.
Well, and that's why, and to me too, that's why I was saying I think the wrestling is the key. I mean, we saw what Colby did to Demian Maia. Okay, and I love Demian Maia. Like, that guy's just, you know, he's class. He does things, to me, the way you're supposed to do things as a fighter. He's very respectful. But then on top of that, even his fighting style, like, if he can go in and submit you without throwing a single punch, he's going to do that. You know, like, he's not out there to injure somebody. You can say that's the right attitude, wrong attitude as a fighter. However you want to look at it, that's your opinion. But he went in there and just handled Demian. You know, Rafael doesn't have the same level of ground skills. Now, and that's not to disrespect Rafael's ground game, because obviously he's a black belt and he's done a lot of good things. But there's a difference between Demian Maia black belt and anybody else in the world black belt. You know, so I think Colby Covington, if he gets top dominant position, this is going to be a long, long fight for RDA.
That's a very good point. You know, I think it's a long night for anybody who ends up on the bottom side of Colby Covington.
Right.
To be honest, what's this say about the champ of the division? Now that they're making this an interim title fight, he has been injured, but he's also called out lightweights. He's called out inflated middleweights. He's called out pretty much everyone but the top 10 of his own division. We're talking about Tyron Woodley. Does this move, making this an interim title fight, to you, does this move signal that the UFC is no longer going to wait around for Woodley or kind of play his games of I want the money fight always? At some point, you have to fight a contender.
Honestly, I think it's politics. I think it's politicking between the UFC and Woodley, because really we've seen Tyron trying to get the money fights. You know, every other champion in the UFC gets the money fights. He's the only one that's not getting the money fights, and
right.
he's made a big stink about that. Which to me, like, who am I to tell you not to make money? You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand why you're doing it, but as a champion, you have an obligation to defend that title and fight everybody that's up and coming. Okay, all the top challengers. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what champions do. So I understand the money aspect, but as a champion, you got to defend that title. Really, what I think this is they're trying to force his hand. I think they're trying to tell him, like, hey man, like, either put that title up on the line, go defend it, or we're gonna find somebody else. You know, so I think they're really just trying to push him to move a little bit faster. But you know, we already know Colby's ready to fight Tyron. You know,
aren't there money fights in the division with people talking trash like Colby Covington? Like, aren't people gonna want to kind of tune in to see.
I
Tyron
think
beat
because
someone up like
they're
that.
both ATT fighters, but Tyron's kind of broke
That-
off from
that
ATT
gym's-
a little bit.
We've seen that gym kind of have two wings to it, though.
Yeah, so, and to
Throughout
me,
the-
I think that's the reason that he's kind of avoiding that whole thing. And I don't know how much they've trained together or haven't trained together. You know, from what I understand, they haven't really dealt with each other too much, but I think Tyron understands what a tough fight that is, and I think that's why he's looking other places for fights.
All right, that's going to do it for segment 2 here on Takedown MMA. Evan Herzog of the Fight Magazine, Albert Rosales of Grinders Fitness. Catch us on ibtv.us and Roku. We have one more segment coming up. We're going to talk about whatever we want to talk about. Thanks for joining us in segment 2.